What would happen if Luffy awakened Gear 5 at Marineford instead of Wano? Well, to start off, I think Luffy would have to die in order to awaken. Even after mastering his fruit all the way up into Wano, the only way he was able to awaken it was by being killed by Kaido. So if a similar thing were to happen in Marineford, I think Akainu would pierce Luffy badly enough to where he dies instead of Ace. I think this blow wouldn't be as brutal as Ace's and would be more like Akainu's blow on Jinbei. I also think it would be similar to how Luffy got one-shotted by Croc's hook. This would mean that Luffy would get pierced badly enough to die, but would still be able to come back to life momentarily. I also think Akainu would barely miss Luffy's heart, which would ultimately be a big mistake, since in a few moments, the drums of liberation would reawaken Luffy's soul. Now, before we get into Luffy coming back to life, let's first take a look at what would happen in between the time of his death and resurrection. First of all, Boa would be foaming at the mouth due to her uncontrollable emotions. She might pass out just like how Luffy did when Ace died. Secondly, I think Ace and Garp would be furious and would take on Akainu 2v1. Although Sengoku was able to hold him back after Ace died, I don't think he'd be able to hold him if Luffy died, since Garp probably values Luffy a bit more than Ace. Garp would probably leap right towards the direction of Akainu with a charged up Pocky Fist. While this happens, Sengoku would scream out, "What do you think you're doing, Garp?" During this fight, I could even see Garp punching Ace and saying, "Look at what you did! I told you idiots to be Marines, and now look at what's happened!" while crying uncontrollably. Ace would probably reply with, "I'm sorry, old man, I never meant for this to happen," while also crying uncontrollably. Whilst Garp and Ace take on Akainu, Aokiji would most likely allow Garp to do his thing since he's his master. However, Kizaru would probably charge at them. Whitebeard, seeing Kizaru about to hit his son, comes in between and then sends Kizaru down to the pits of hell, just like how he sent Akainu. This would be where Marineford starts to become destroyed. Whitebeard then screams to Ace and his sons, "I told you guys to get out of here! Don't worry, I'll take care of everything!" He then tells Ace specifically, "If you don't want your brother to die in vain, then escape with your life! You can always fight Akainu another day. However, today is not the time!" Just as he says this, that's when everyone notices something strange happening from the area that Luffy died. They all hear a beat. But from what? All that's lying there is a dead boy's body. Right? They see Luffy's body and specifically his chest moving every time the beat is played. A fog comes out of Luffy and people begin to ask if it's smoke from Akainu's lava. They don't realize it yet, but they couldn't be any more wrong. The scene cuts to the Gorosei and one of them shockingly says, "Is that what I think it is? The drums of liberation! They haven't been played in 800 years!" It cuts back to Luffy and Luffy's body starts to move. He smiles a confident smile and then starts to laugh. As he laughs, his clothes and hair become completely white and his eyes become red. He finally stands up wobbling like a newborn deer and says, "What happened to me? Why can I still stand, even though I lost?" Just like how everyone was in awe when this happened in Wano, the same thing would happen in Marineford. Instead of seeing Sanji, Kid, Law, Marco, Nami, Tama, and Hyogoro's reactions, we'd probably see the Marineford legends. I'd expect to see Whitebeard's, Ace's, Garp's, and Sengoku's. I would also expect to see Doflamingo letting out an excited yet terrifying laugh while screaming, "This is getting good!" We'd probably even see Ivankov's reaction and him saying something like, "Straw Hat Boy, what are you?" I could even see there being a cutscene to people watching the Marineford War from a transponder snail, which means we may even see Rayleigh's reaction. If this happens, I would also want to see Magellan's reaction since he was one of the main antagonists for the Summit War saga. While he's pooping his pants, he'd probably say something like, "I should have killed you when I had the chance." Boa would also probably wake up after hearing Luffy's voice. She'd probably start crying tears of joy since her future husband is still alive. After everyone's reactions, it would cut back to Luffy saying, "This is getting fun." He then jumps up into the air and starts running through the sky. It then cuts to Whitebeard, who is deeply pondering something that his old friend told him. He remembers the last time he saw Roger and thinks to himself, "Joy Boy. Joy Boy is real!" As Luffy is jumping and running around in the air, he says, "Oh yeah, that's right, I'm in a war to save Ace." As he says this, his eyes pop out of his head and then Garp's, Whitebeard's, Ace's, Kizaru's, Aokiji's, Akainu's, Marco's, Boa's, and Sengoku's eyes pop out of their heads too. Buggy's eyes also pop out of his head as he stares in awe and then comes back to reality and says, "Wait, mine are supposed to do that, but still, not everyone else is." After this, I'd expect Luffy to charge right at Akainu since he would be the guy currently fighting Ace. However, before any of the war starts again, we first need to ask ourselves, how strong would Marineford Gear 5 even be? It's kind of a difficult question to answer since he wouldn't have any haki. Well, first of all, the awakening itself is supposed to give Luffy's rubbery body greater physical strength and freedom. We know this is true since Luffy says that he can finally do everything he's ever wanted to do while in Gear 5. I would even say that Luffy getting physically stronger is an understatement since he's literally able to pick up Dragon Kaido, leap into the air while holding him, swing him around like a ragdoll, and smash his head into the ground over and over again. On top of this, Luffy is also able to swing Kaido around as a jump rope. I think the more accurate description of Luffy's awakening is that he becomes the strongest person in the entire world. I mean, think about how huge Dragon Kaido is and how much he'd weigh. Can Garp or even Prime Whitebeard swing Dragon Kaido around like that? I personally don't think so. This feat will be enabled in Marineford since haki doesn't affect someone's physical strength or capabilities. It only affects their willpower or haki abilities. Another underestimated ability of Gear 5 is Luffy's ability to tank insane shots to his body without blocking it with haki. I mean, Yamato even states how he took the full brunt of Kaido's blast breath, showing that he didn't block it at all. After this, Luffy brushes it off and starts charging after Kaido. Not only did he do this once, but he also tanked another blast breath later on in the fight. In Marineford terms, Luffy would be able to tank any of Kizaru's light moves, any of Aokiji's ice moves, and possibly even some of Akainu's lava moves. Now, to increase Luffy's defense even more, he's also able to tank blows from Kaido, while Kaido is using advanced conquers and armament. Yet again, Luffy isn't blocking these attacks with haki and is taking them head on. How he's able to get up after any of these beats me. Remember that Luffy got one-shotted while in Gear 4 from one of these attacks, which shows that Gear 5's defense is 20 times stronger than Gear 4 Bound Man's. With these feats, I'd expect Luffy to be able to take blows from Garp's, Sengoku's, and Whitebeard's strongest moves. This leaves him at around Marco's level since Marco was also able to do this. Even without haki, his attacks would also probably be even stronger than Marco's. If we take a look at pre-time skip Luffy, we often underestimate him since he didn't have haki. However, even without it, he defeated Croc, Enel, Loser Lucci, and Moria. At the very least, Luffy was Warlord level, and with Gear 5, he'd probably boost up to 1st Division Yonko Commander level. Also remember that Luffy would be able to turn anything into rubber, which means that he might not even need haki to punch Logias. Another power Luffy would obtain is the most ridiculous power of all, which is to quite literally do anything he wants. If he wants to grab lightning and throw it at someone, he can. If he wants to run on the air, he can. If he wants to bounce Kaido's blast back at him, he can. If he wants to marry the most beautiful woman in the world, he can. Just kidding, that one isn't due to Gear 5, it's actually due to Gear Riz. But still, I feel like Marineford Gear 5 Luffy would be bouncing Kizaru's light beams back at the Marines. He'd also probably go into his giant form, and remember, Gear 3's giant punch is described to gain a lot more power than a normal punch, so imagine how much stronger his entire body becomes when becoming a giant and while in Gear 5. And now that I explained how strong Luffy would be, now let's go back to the fights. So, as I left off, he'd be charging towards Akainu since Akainu would be fighting Ace. I think just like how we saw Wano Gear 5 go crazy on a Yonko, I think Luffy would do the same thing to Akainu. This would reveal just how much stronger he's become. I feel like the first thing he'd do is make Akainu rubber and then punch his head just like how he did with Kaido. This attack wouldn't do nearly as much damage since he wouldn't have advanced conquers, however, I still think it could do a decent amount. After this, he'd probably hit him with the Gear 5 Gatling and knock him into the ground. This shouldn't phase Akainu very much and he'd probably get right back up and throw the same lava punch that killed Luffy. This time, Luffy would dodge it with his Gear 5 super speed and say something like, "Not this time," while laughing. I think after this, Garp would tell Luffy that without haki, he still isn't a match for Akainu and to take Ace and get out of there. Although Luffy came back alive, Garp would still fight Akainu since he already betrayed the world government. At this point, there's no going back. I think as Luffy and Ace are trying to escape, Sengoku would send his best marines towards them. This would include Aokiji, Vice Admirals, and some of the Giant Squad. Whitebeard would once again protect Ace and would take on Aokiji himself. That would leave Ace and Luffy the Vice Admirals and Giants. I think Ace would take on some of the Vice Admirals while Luffy would solo the Giants. This is where we'd see Luffy use his raw strength, as I could see him swinging the Giants around just like how he swung Kaido around. This could also be the time where he unleashes his giant form. Also, as I said before, Kizaru would have been shot into the ground by Whitebeard's Guragura attack, but he'd probably end up coming back to the surface right around this time. This means that he'd be the next opponent to take them on. This is where we'd see Luffy's dream powers come into play, as he literally does whatever he wants. This is where Luffy would bounce Kizaru's light powers back at him or towards other marines. Now, spoiler warning for anime onlys, so go to this timestamp if you aren't caught up on Egghead. Now, when Luffy fights Kizaru with Ace, I'd expect Luffy to use some of the moves he did at Egghead. Just like how he turned Kizaru into rubber, I think he'd do the same thing here and pick him up and throw him straight into Marineford headquarters. I could also see Luffy using the same blocking technique on Kizaru's light that he used in Egghead. After Luffy has his fair share of fun, I think Ace would also get a shot at fighting Kizaru. This is the only admiral we didn't see Ace go up again, so I think it'd be very cool to see. This would be a fight where Ace would have to rely more on Haki since his fire was able to melt Aokiji's ice. His fire wouldn't be very effective against light. I honestly think Ace would hold his own against Kizaru since there's nothing that we've seen Kizaru do that shows he'd be much stronger than Ace. During this battle, Whitebeard would continue to scream at his sons to get out of Marineford, but it's a lot easier said than done. Just like how Jinbei told Ace and Luffy they're specifically targeting you two, it's Pops' last wish that his men get away alive. The same scenario would be happening in this hypothetical. I think in this hypothetical, Whitebeard would have the same mentality to take Marineford down with him. I think his plan would yet again be to sink Marineford so his men could escape. Something that would be really cool to see is if Whitebeard tells his men this plan, and then if Luffy tells the old man that he wants to do an attack with him. Theoretically, Luffy could easily make an earthquake while in Gear 5, since he could turn the entire ground into rubber. All he would have to do at that point is either shake it or have it move around. If Luffy does this, combined with Whitebeard's Gura Gura Nomi attack, they would easily be able to completely destroy the entire island of Marineford. I think at this point, everyone on Marineford would begin questioning if they need to evacuate the area. This would force the Whitebeard pirates to take their captain's words seriously when he yelled at them to get to safety. I also think that Luffy might run out of his energy right around here since we know Gear 5 doesn't last very long. This would force Ace to try to evacuate with his brother rather than fight Kizaru. Ace would probably have to pick him up and make sure he doesn't get hit. So basically at this point, there would be complete chaos as Whitebeard is fighting Aokiji and the entire marine fleet. Garp is fighting Akainu. Ace is trying to protect Luffy. Luffy is out of energy. The Whitebeard pirates are fighting the marines while also trying to flee. Marineford is crumbling to the ground and Sengoku's hair is turning whiter and whiter as he stresses more and more. As all of this is happening, the worst possible thing that could happen happens. Blackbeard shows up. So when Blackbeard shows up, I think a similar thing would happen as in canon Marineford. I think Whitebeard would destroy Aokiji in some way or would somehow stop fighting him and would then go straight after Blackbeard. Right before this, I think he would cut Marineford into two to separate himself and the marines from his men. I think the main difference would be that Whitebeard would have to yell at Ace to not go after Blackbeard again, just like how he yelled at Marco. Although Ace is extremely hard-headed, I think he'd have to listen since the entire Marineford war was revolved around him losing to Blackbeard. He'd also have to listen since his main goal would be to get Luffy to safety. He won't risk Luffy's life another time for his selfish needs. The last time he did that, Luffy literally died and then came back to life. Whitebeard would probably tell Ace to fight Teach another time, just not today. Other than this, Blackbeard and Whitebeard would go down exactly like the canon manga. Blackbeard and Shuryu might have to hit Whitebeard with a few more blows, since Whitebeard wouldn't have his head blown off by Akainu in this scenario. However, he would still be on the brink of death. I think Whitebeard would still say his legendary final words right before he dies.
One Piece wa jitsuzai suru.
These words would also hit harder since he would know that Joy Boy actually exists. Since he knows that, he probably now knows that everything that Roger told him was 100% true. I also think Whitebeard telling Teach that he's not the man Roger is waiting for would hit harder, since we know Roger was waiting for Joy Boy. When Whitebeard dies to Blackbeard, Ace would hate him even more, and this would lead to a future event that I'll be talking about later on in the video. However, Ace will stick to the plan of escaping with Luffy. I think that as everyone is trying to escape, Akainu is still trying his hardest to kill Luffy and Ace while fighting Garp. I think somehow he might shoot a lava shot at Ace and Luffy and it would hit the both of them, just like how he hit Jinbei and Luffy in the canon story. This would be how Luffy gets his chest scar. I also think that even though Ace is a Logia, he would purposely try to take the lava shot himself because he wouldn't want any of it to get on Luffy. Although he fails to do so, he still succeeds at saving Luffy's life. If he allowed it to go through his Logia abilities, it would have all melted through Luffy's body. I don't think Luffy would have been able to survive that considering the state he's in. When this happens, happens, I think Garp would actually try to kill Sakazuki since he would realize he either ends him or he risks his grandson's life. Although I already made an entire video on what would have happened if Garp fought Akainu at Marineford, what do you guys think would have happened? Do you guys think Garp is capable of killing Akainu at this point of the story? Do you guys think he would kill him even if Luffy and Ace survive? If he goes all out, I think Garp has a good chance at killing him, to be honest, especially since we know Akainu was worn down from Whitebeard. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. While this happens, Blackbeard is getting busy with Whitebeard's body. Pause. Play. Sengoku is screaming at Garp and trying to figure out a way to save the island. The Whitebeard pirates are trying to escape Kizaru and Aokiji, and the Marines are trying to stop the Whitebeard pirates while also trying to escape themselves. I think at this point, Aokiji might try to freeze the entire island to stop it from self-destruction. I feel like he could only freeze so much since he wouldn't want to freeze his fellow Marines in the process. This would help stabilize the island for some time. However, it doesn't last for long since Blackbeard eventually surprises everyone with his Gurugura no Mi abilities and cracks all the ice that Aokiji created. This does even more damage to Marineford than before, and it ends up becoming an unstable island that could sink at any moment. Sengoku and Blackbeard would then have their little fight while Sengoku tries to stop any more damage from happening. I think right around this time, everyone would notice someone coming from the direction of the red line. It's the man that the Gorosei sent to kill Joy Boy. By the way, if you're an anime only, skip to this timestamp if you don't want to get spoiled. The man that they send is no other than the legendary celestial dragon, Saint Figureland Garling. I feel like the Gorosei will send him out of everyone since he's probably the most trusted man for the job. Not only is he strong enough to make a presence at Marineford, but he's also a guy that would want Joy Boy dead as badly as they do. As soon as Garling appears, he would probably say something like, "Where's that Straw Hat Kid?" The Whitebeard pirates are probably afraid of him but don't know why he came. They would still be trying to escape. I think right around this time, Kobe lets out his speech on ending the war in order to save lives. He'll probably say that Whitebeard already died and that they can still save the lives of many wounded soldiers. He'll also say that if they don't take action soon, then everyone on the island will be at high risk of sinking with Marineford. After this happens, instead of Akainu, Figureland would try to kill Kobe. He does this since he's going against the idea of killing all the pirates that go against the world government. Figureland could also care less if the Marines die, since he believes humans to be scum and their lives to be worthless. Right before he's about to slice Kobe's head off, Shanks blocks his attack. This would be a jaw-dropping moment since it would be son versus father, family member versus family member, and Figureland versus Figureland. Garling would be furious since his own son is getting in his way of killing Kobe and Joy Boy. I think Shanks would still say everything he said in Marineford. He would still tell everyone that if they want to fight, then to fight him. During this, Luffy would have escaped with Ace, Law, and possibly Jinbei. Boa Hancock would follow Luffy to make sure he's alright. I think this time, the war might end because everyone would have to evacuate before the island sinks. I think the Marineford incident could potentially become the next God Valley incident. Just like how his captain was the cause of an event that was lost to history, Whitebeard would also be the cause of such an incident. I think the island may disappear from the world due to the Gurugura's destruction, and the world government may try to erase the incident from the history books since Nika was involved. I mean, they already covered up the Impel Down incident, so it wouldn't surprise me if they did this too. It would be a very tough task though, since many people witnessed it live. I think Figureland would stop fighting since Joy Boy would have already escaped. It would be a pretty crazy parallel if he tells Shanks that the only reason he's not going to continue fighting is only because it's you, red-haired. I mean, knowing that Shanks might be his son and has a connection with the Gorosei, Figureland might not want to fight him. And for the most part, that's what I think would have happened if Luffy awakened Gear 5 at Marineford. So now let's talk about the aftermath. Law would have still saved Luffy's life. If Jinbei didn't hop on Law's ship with Ace and Luffy, then he would have hopped on Boa's with Ivankov. Boa would have taken them all to Amazon Lily so the government doesn't find out where Luffy and Ace are. Luffy, Ace, and Jinbei would have taken some time to heal, and once they recover, Rayleigh would show up. I think Rayleigh would still come to see if Luffy's okay since he found out that Luffy is Joy Boy. I think Rayleigh will want to help Luffy even more now after finding that out. I even think he would still convince Luffy to have a 2-year training arc, since the thing that seems to convince Luffy was the fact that he and his crew didn't even stand a chance on Sabaody. It's not the fact that Luffy was too weak to save Ace that made him want to have a 2-year break, but it's actually this. If the Straw Hats take a 2-year break, then nothing really changes for them. The only thing that would change for them would actually be that Luffy would be insanely strong at the beginning of the time skip. He probably wouldn't be post Wano strong, but he'd probably be post Whole Cake strong. Although he would gain Haki, he would still need to develop the advanced techniques like Future Sight and Ryo. I also wonder if Luffy would even obtain Gear 4 or if he'd just train Gear 5 the entire time skip. I mean, there's almost no need to create Gear 4 when he already has Gear 5. The fight against Doflamingo would be insane since it would literally be Nika taking down a Celestial Dragon King. I also wonder if Luffy would go Gear 5 in Fishman Island and would then lead to the Sea Kings having their own Zunisha moment where they say, "I hear the drum of liberation for the first time in 800 years, Joy Boy is here!" This honestly might not happen since it didn't even take Gear 4 to defeat Hody, however, it would be a cool scene to see if it did. Another big change in the story would be between Ace and Blackbeard. I think Ace and Marco would have teamed up in the Payback War and would have actually kept a few more of Whitebeard's islands. They probably would have kept Fishman Island. I still think Blackbeard would have won, but with Ace in the war, it would have been a lot closer of a match. Ace surviving would also mean that in the post-time skip, he would be one of the strongest characters in One Piece. He would probably be Yonko level by the Egghead arc and might even be stronger than Luffy. I also wonder if Ace would have gone to Wano since we know that he always wanted to take down Kaido. That would make a huge difference to the Wano arc. Now, another big change would be that Garp would be considered a criminal for fighting Akainu. He would probably be arrested but then easily escape. I don't think someone of his caliber would be arrested easily. This would make a huge difference in the story as to who would train Kobe. I wonder if Garp would still be in Sword or would have secret ties to the Marines. Maybe he would even join the revolutionaries. Or maybe he would do his own thing like vigilante work against the pirates. On the other hand, if Akainu survived Marineford, he would most likely still become Fleet Admiral. However, if he didn't, then Aokiji would. This would make a huge difference to the story since that would mean he never joined Blackbeard. I think another big change would be that Sabo wouldn't get the Marimara no Mi. He'd also probably meet up with Ace sometime in the time skip after remembering who he is. Also, do you guys think Sabo will end up with Conqueror's Haki? Isn't it kinda crazy that so many strong One Piece characters aren't confirmed Conquerors? This includes guys like Akainu, Aokiji, Mihawk, and Dragon. Check out this video right here to see all 50 characters that I think could have a chance at getting Conquerors.